Thanks, Callie. And so I'll kick things off from here, I guess. My name is Jim Sullivan. I'm the director of the Bennington County Regional Commission. I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues here and a couple of good folks from the Wyndham Regional Commission, more than a couple, I guess. And so we're working very closely with Katie Buckley with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns on trying to get as much information out to everybody who is interested and responsible for making effective use of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, ARPA, as we all call it. So we've had a couple of sessions with folks and are available to answer questions. Callie Fishburne and Allison Stroll from the Bennington County Regional Commission are our point people. So if folks have questions after this, they can certainly always get in touch with Callie and Allison. You can find their contact information on our website. Probably Callie, knowing Callie, she'll probably post that in the chat. So, yeah, I don't have a lot more to say other than we're available to answer questions. And I'll turn it over to Chris Campany from the eastern side of southern Vermont to say hello.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, really appreciate everybody coming out today and appreciate Katie reaching out to us to help set this up and have this program and answer some questions. On our side, our staff leads are Sue Westa and Margot Gia. They're both here, and you can find their contact information on our website. I'll plug that. I'll drop that into the chat in a minute. And then also here is our Associate Director, John Bennett. He is here checking in on us to make sure that he's in the loop too. And our former director, Jim Matteau, is also joining us. But I think he's representing the village of Westminster at this point, as opposed to wanting to rejoin staff. And
that is correct. None of you have that much money to get me back in.
So I'll turn it over to Katie.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Jim. And just so you know, my last slide in my slide deck has Callie, Allison, Sue, and Margot's contact information in it. So that'll cover that base and check that box there. So thank you, everybody, for being with us today. I'm really excited to be joined with the RPCs for this presentation. They're incredible partners throughout all of this gray area of ARPA that we're trying to turn more into black and white, and it's not the easiest task. So I'm looking forward to doing that with everybody. So I have a slide deck presentation that I'm going to run through quickly. If some of you may have seen these slides before and you're probably sick of them, I'm apologizing now, asking for blanket apology. You can snooze during this part of the presentation, but I'm going to move through the slides really quickly so that we can leave plenty of time for question and answer. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Give me just a sec here. Sorry, I got a new computer, so this isn't really working the way I want it to. Hang on one sec. How's that? Can you see my screen?
Yep, it looks good.
Great. I have 3 monitors, so trying to get everything on the right place isn't the easiest thing. So we are doing ARPA 2.0. We feel like we're past the basics now, the real basic level. So I have a few intro slides, and then we'll get into a little bit meatier stuff, but the meatiest part is going to be in the question and answer period at the end. So what we'll cover today, Vermont's ARPA breakdown, the share of the money, how it's broken out, timeline, what you can and cannot do with your ARPA funding, quick overview of reporting, little information on other people's money, some public engagement examples, some early ideas in Vermont and nationally, and the role of VLCT and your RPC, which I think everybody's pretty aware of at this point. So
I'm in a meeting. Yeah.
okay, so this is Vermont's share. In total, Vermont will receive 1.25 billion of ARPA funding. Just a little over 1 billion goes to the state of Vermont and will be deployed through state agencies, departments, other organizations. There'll be grant and assistance programs that you'll see on the horizon. Some have already been put out there. The rest, a little over 200 million, will go to municipalities. And thanks to our congressional delegation and our governor, the $121 million there listed for counties has been reallocated and is going directly to municipalities. And you are already in receipt of some of that funding. Vermont has 2 metro cities. They are Burlington and South Burlington. They got their money separately. Everybody else is considered an NEU, a non-entitlement unit of government, about $58 million for NEUs, obviously combined there with your county money. So all recipients of Vermont's ARPA funding, the state and all municipalities have awards directly with the US Department of the Treasury. Everyone follows the same rule. It's Treasury's interim final rule, which is the implementation side of the American Rescue Plan Act. We're waiting on the final rule. Still, the comment period closed for the interim final rule on July 16th, but we don't even have a hint of when the final rule will be released. So we are still in a bit of a waiting mode for that. So by now, every Vermont municipality should have received its first payments of local and county ARPA money. It's cash sitting in your banks collecting interest, which you can keep. The second payments will follow around the same time next year, late summer, early fall. You'll see that all funds, and I'm sure you're aware that all funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024. All funds expended by December 31st, 2026. That's money out the door. By that date, anything left over goes back to Treasury. So we're really spend every penny of it. We're going to help you spend every penny of it. And just a little point of housekeeping, anywhere in my slides where you see that sort of cobalt blue text that's underlined is all an active link that will click through to a resource document. So if you want the slide deck after and download it and click on those, it'll take you to resource documents, which you can spend ARPA money on. There are 7 expenditure categories or categories: public health, negative economic impacts, services to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, infrastructure, which is water, sewer, and broadband, revenue replacement, and administrative. Those are the 7 categories that sort of break out those 4 buckets that we originally talked about. And if you take a deeper dive and have looked into your guidance documents for your compliance and reporting documents with Treasury, you'll recognize, I know these are tiny little screenshots, but this is Appendix 1 from that compliance and reporting document. And it takes those 7 categories and it breaks them out into 66 subcategories, which if you look at those and as you're thinking about ways to spend your money, if they fit into one of these categories, then you know you have an eligible use of ARPA funds. Which cannot spend your money on. Since your ARPA award is a federal award, you can't use it as a non-federal match for another federal award. So you should, if you are considering using your ARPA funding in a project that has other funding sources in it, other grants, take a look at your grant agreements and see what type of funding they are and what kind of funding they allow for match. And that will help you understand whether or not you can use your ARPA funding as the match. In most instances, if it's federal, you cannot. You can't use it for pension funds, for infrastructure that's not directly addressed in ARPA, or for rainy day funds, financial reserves, or to pay down outstanding debt. Some things to consider with your ARPA money. You can pool your funds, so it's really helpful to learn about what the priorities are for your neighboring communities and see if there are any intersections with your own, and find opportunities to pool funds. An example of that might be, let's say you and 2 of your neighbors desperately need childcare. So you could work together to develop a childcare center that services your 3 communities without each of you doing individual ones, sort of spreading those resources out. You'll have scale at a level that will be sustainable. You can transfer your funds. So an example of that might be a water or sewer district that needs to make ARPA eligible improvements. You could transfer some of your funds to a water sewer district. Take time, be patient, and think bigger. Keep in mind that only about half of the state's $1 billion has been allocated. The rest will be allocated in this upcoming 2022 legislative session. So more money will land. We have to wait and see. There are also 2 huge bills being taken up by Congress, the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill. And there could be intersections with ARPA for that. So more funding coming to leverage and or to fund projects that aren't ARPA eligible, like transportation. Reporting. All municipalities, as I said, your agreement is with Treasury, so all your reporting will be directly with Treasury. Any use, the municipalities that aren't Burlington or South Burlington have an annual reporting schedule, and I'm sure all of you are aware that that date was pushed out from October 31st to April 30th, 2022. So you have 6 months of leash there, which is great. And a reminder, the state, although they were the financial intermediary, they have no oversight for your money. So there's no required reporting to the state. There might be courtesy reporting to the state just to share information, but other than that, there's no requirement. Treasury has created an online portal for reporting. So all of your grant documentation you should be keeping in a PDF format so that will be uploaded through that portal. More instruction on what the portal, how the portal will operate for you is yet to come from Treasury. Just sort of keep in your brain, whoever was your authorized representative and your contact person when you certified for your funding back in July, those are the folks who will probably be getting a communication direct from Treasury when that time comes. So tell them to be vigilant about their email and checking spam. Other people's money, this is my favorite kind of money. So look for opportunities to leverage your ARPA money. If there are other programs or grant sources out there so that you can add them into your project to get more done, you should look for opportunities to do that. We hosted a funders webinar on October 19th. If you click that link there, it takes you right to our website where there is a recording. So if you missed it, you can still participate in that way. And the slide deck is there for download. And it includes all the presenters' slide decks, which contain some really valuable information. So I encourage folks to take a look at that. Also, the state of Vermont recovery plan. If any of you are compliance junkies like me and have read that guidance, you'll know the state of Vermont has to do a recovery plan as a requirement of their reporting. And they've done that and submitted it in late August or September. And that link takes you through to their plan. And it is very interesting, but the most interesting part comes, on page 10, which is where the state lays out its plan for its ARPA money. And it has the expenditure categories, just like the appendix 1 I showed earlier, program name, overview, but most importantly, it has all the funding amounts that they're proposing for those programs. So as you're thinking about the projects you want to do in your local communities, you can think about what kind of money is available at the state and through their plan. ARPA in Vermont, public engagement and outreach. Although public engagement is not a specific requirement of ARPA awards for any use, it is implicit in the language of the interim final rule. It's sort of woven all throughout that. And since this money is largely discretionary, asking residents for their input is critical, especially in these times where many do not trust government on the national level or on the local level either. So having their voices be heard is important for them, and it's important for you as local leaders. This slide contains just a few examples that I know of for what communities are doing throughout the state and doing together their input. And as you can see, it ranges from a regular item on a warned agenda in select board meetings all the way to, ARPA dedicated web pages, surveys. ARPA committees are becoming a popular thing to form throughout the state. So whatever is right for the community is how you'll guide your public input process. These are some early ideas of uses for ARPA funds that have been floated from communities throughout the state. As you can see, water and sewer is the most popular item that keeps coming up, which obviously it's a critical piece of infrastructure that helps all sorts of local priorities take place, like housing and business development and that sort of stuff. So this, I will, full disclosure, I got it all off the internet. So if you see something that's not correct, that's where my information came from. So this is ARPA nationally. The National League of Cities has created a local action tracker. And so for anybody out there who's interested in what's happening with ARPA outside of Vermont, this state's for you. It's a very cool site with this dashboard. As you can see, 443 are the number of entries just about ARPA. So National League partnered with Bloomberg Philanthropies, and they created this dashboard. And you can search it in all different ways. And if you're interested, it's worth taking a visit. So this next slide, these are all ideas when I was going through of things that larger cities are contemplating, but they are scalable for Vermont. I mean, they could be done in the scale that we have here. So where some of the ideas on that dashboard are for really big cities, bigger than the entire state of Vermont, some of the ideas are definitely relatable to smaller communities. So as you're aware, and what Jim and Chris had shared at the beginning, Vermont League of Cities and Towns has an ARPA Assistance and Coordination Program. This is my full-time job. This is what I do all day, every day. So I work with communities throughout the state. I work incredibly closely with the RPCs, meet with them regularly, talk to them regularly, partner with them regularly. And they are the other critical side of the ARPA Assistance and Coordination Program. And this is the RPC slide. I'm sure you're all aware at how valuable they are and how critical they are as you move ahead in your ARPA work. And that's my slide deck. So if there are questions, I'm happy to work with all the RPC folks who are on the call to help field them. And that's all of our contacts. Jim and Chris, I didn't include you guys, sorry.
So I guess we're ready to take questions. I don't know if it's easiest to put the gallery view back up so that
I'm gonna try. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Still struggling with my screens here. There we go.
And I have a question just to kick things off, Katie. So
yeah,
you saw a lot of towns are interested in, kind of some kind of community scale water, wastewater solution, we'll call it, often for village areas, but it's also kind of an intimidating thing to start to deal with. You get $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 land in your lap, and then there's some potential matching or some other funds that you can leverage from the state, and people are going to need some help in doing that and in figuring out really what they actually want. Is the municipal ARPA money, can municipalities use that for like planning and preliminary engineering work?
Anything that's eligible in the EPA's eligibility handbooks for clean water and drinking water is an eligible use of ARPA. So if planning is spelled out in there, then it's eligible. Also, I just want to add that if you attended our funders webinar, you would have seen a presentation from the Agency of Natural Resources Secretary Julie Moore. They are creating a series of spotlight webinars that are topic specific for each of the areas. We should start to hear more sort of like promotion, I would say. They'll start to promote those events. I do know they're going to be in Tuesday mornings in November each week. And it'll be 2 sessions back to back. So you can pick the ones that you want to attend. I think they're 10 and 11. So just sort of preliminarily before we see their press release on all of that, which I would anticipate maybe is coming this week. I think they're going to start pretty quick here. So I think in those sessions, Jim, they'll share more about that. And if we need to come back together and create a resource team to host a webinar on those, I think it makes sense to do that. Not to get too weedy in that subject, but to make sure that people who want to, communities who want to start to get into the planning process so that they can lead to implementation, that we have all the right resources in place to help folks do that. So.
Great, thank you.
I don't know if that answered the question, but.
It certainly did. I appreciate that. I think since there's so much interest in that out there, that it's good to talk about how you get started.
So I'm gonna just do hands maybe. There's questions in the chat too. Hey, Callie, do you think I could ask for your help with the questions in the chat, and I'll try and do the hands? Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sure.
I'm like awful at fielding questions. So I see Brattleboro, you have your hand up.
Yes, good afternoon, Katie. How are you?
Hey, Patrick, good. How are you?
Doing really well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. This was very helpful. I would say that right now our board is sort of in a, we're inclined to wait and see what the final guidance is going to come out with. So we're eager to see where that lands as opposed to the interim final guidance. And I certainly understand the wisdom of potentially partnering local municipal ARPA funds with other state resources. But there's a concern, I think, that's been expressed by some of my board members that, if there is an existing state program which is being utilized, state ARPA resources to address an issue, well, then maybe, we should be looking at someplace that isn't getting addressed. And so I certainly understand the wisdom of partnering funds together, but I also understand the wisdom of, maybe operating where nobody else is operating. And what that leads me to wonder is, what would you say is the most comprehensive resource of all that the state is doing with its ARPA funding and potentially other major, federal allocations, just so that I can make sure and keep them informed, like, this is what the state's doing here, and here. And so, we can choose to sort of piggyback on that, or we can choose to do something different.
Yeah, that's there are lots of schools of thought, right? So,
Yeah.
And it really depends upon the community's priorities and how they want to. For some communities, they're going to layer in their ARPA money there, like water sewer might be, that's the one thing they need to get done. And or whatever it is. And that's what's so wonderful and terrifying at the same time about this money is that we're all used to the really tight guardrails of a federal funding program, right? You know exactly what you can and can't do. You shape your project first, and then you seek your funding. This is completely opposite to that. So the most complete place that I know of for the state's ARPA buckets, I'm going to call them, is that recovery plan that I shared in the slide deck. So if you go in there and you go to page 10, you will see each of the proposed programs and the dollar amounts for those programs. So you can have a better preliminary understanding of knowing where the state's ARPA dollars are going to land, to see if there's any intersection with your own in terms of your own priorities. Those, they're not they're preliminary. So all of the agencies that you see the programs listed for, they are working very hard right now to draft, to basically stand up a program.
Yeah.
And they can shape that program however they like. So you got a preview of that if you saw A&R's webinars. They're
I
wanting
did.
to fund new projects. You know, they get to sort of pick and choose. So however those programs come out, there might be program requirements that don't necessarily fit with yours, or that require you to put your ARPA money first ahead of theirs. So that waiting and seeing how it all lands is kind of a strategic move if you're used to using a complicated capital stack for your projects. So on the federal level, that's the hardest, because there are bills that are huge that are just waiting. And so you could go to the National League of Cities website. They do a really good job of tracking those, the latest versions of those bills. I actually had 2 links in my slide. One was for the infrastructure bill, but it was information from, I think, early September, and it's stale at this point. I don't know what the current iteration of it is, but they're a very good resource for that information, especially as it relates to municipalities, because they're a lobbying group essentially for municipalities with the on the national level. So those are my 2 best, the state, and I'll do my best to try and keep my eye on the state, and, you know, working in partnership with the RPCs. If we hear any resources that are good information sources, so you know where the money is landing, and they'll be on the VLCT ARPA webpage. So.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. And I just want to say hi to Jim Matteau. It's been a long time.
Chris, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up quickly on something that Jen was talking about. I don't remember if the planning piece is supported under the EPA guidance or not. And Katie, I'm not sure if you're 100% sure of it.
Not.
Or not, but that's something we need to get back to everybody. But this is what I wanted to say about that. I worry, I've been doing this for enough decades now that too often these infrastructure discussions, especially around water and wastewater infrastructure, is really discussed more as an engineering exercise as opposed to a community development exercise. And I would really encourage towns to take the approach of, and again, hopefully this will be supported by ARPA, to really engage in what do you want, what are the needs in the town. And when it comes to water and wastewater, there are public health needs, you know, as far as like water quality in the villages where and other places where you have, you know, compact settlement without community water and wastewater, where you've got septic systems and wells shadowing one another. But what I'm really talking about is engaging in a conversation about what does the community need. And we're having a lot of conversations now around housing. And one of the fundamental issues around housing is to really develop housing in meaningful numbers, the numbers that we need to actually meet the current crisis and then future growth, is going to require the water and wastewater systems to actually support the quantity of housing that's needed to actually make it pencil out to where it can be something that average persons can afford. And we've begun a webinar series with One Windsor Housing Trust that's getting into just the nuts and bolts of what it takes to develop housing. But my concern is that if a community just begins to have a conversation about water and wastewater, I've seen those conversations die quickly. But if you actually start having a conversation about what are our housing needs, what are our economic development needs, what are our business retention needs, like if we want our community markets to continue to operate and grow, what do we need to do in terms of making transit more possible? What do we need to do so people can more easily age in place and have housing choice as they live their lives here in Vermont? You know, maybe it's a young couple without a family, then the young couple with a family, then the empty nesters. How can you stay and continue to live in your community and have housing choice? where are the best places to locate daycare centers? Where are the best place to locate adult daycare centers? Have those kinds of conversations, then have the water and wastewater discussion. Because then you actually have a reason the reasons to really think about why you might need that community infrastructure. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know we don't necessarily want to dig too deep into that one topic, but I would just encourage folks that this is not an engineering exercise. This is like you're really investing in discussions about your community's future and how to achieve it, and why it may be worth making the investments.
Jim? Jim, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I guess, I don't see anyone else, so I guess it's me. A couple of things. I have a picky question, but before that, just to throw into the discussion with what Chris was just describing reminded me that while we have a few people here in Westminster trying to look at that big picture, we have a lot of people who just want to go dig a hole someplace and figure out what to put in it later. And that's not helpful. And when we talk about things like we have a problem that we can't really develop housing unless we come up with something better than the type of water system that's available, very limited here in the village where I live, and none elsewhere in town. And instantly a lot of people see, well, if we do that, then that housing stuff's going to start to happen. So we want to be careful not to do any improvements that would enable stuff to happen and people to come in. So there's the kind of thing that makes me want to go back to being fully retired and staring me in the face, and I'm not looking forward to it. But I think anyone who has ideas or runs into that, I'm one who would happily take any advice. The picky question I have is, if we've got a small infrastructure project that we haven't figured it out yet, but if it fits, is it eligible if any part of it has already begun, whether that's actual construction or just design or anything? Or is it disqualified, as some grants would be, if you've already spent the dollar?
I think it would depend. If it's your local money, it's as long as it meets the eligibility requirements in the EPA's handbooks, you're good. If you were to layer in state money on top of that, they might have a problem with it.
Actually, we would be spending local and private money if we get started ahead of that.
No, your local money is the most flexible money for that. So all of those, as long as the costs were incurred, Jim, after March 3rd, 2021. So if you have expenditures from then on, you could fund them with your ARPA.
Right. And if anything we spend before that, you say March 3rd, was that the date you said?
So as long as you obligate the funds by the December 31st, 2024, and you get them out the door by the end of 2026.
Okay, but I guess
as of right now, who knows what Treasury is going to do with those dates, right?
But if I understood, I just want to be sure I understood that. Suppose people say, okay, we've determined it is eligible, and we're going to obligate the funds, and it's February 15th when they do that. Anything we spent before February 15th is not reimbursable, but the money is good going forward from that point on. Is that correct?
It's when costs are incurred.
When costs are incurred.
That's
not
specific
when the
language in
decision
there.
was made. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Jim, I see you have a hand up.
Sure. I just like playing with the little symbols and stuff. So I've talked to a number of towns that I'll call them mid-sized Vermont towns with populations like in the 500 to 1,000 range. They're actually getting a fair bit of money, but they don't really have any infrastructure and have had a little bit of a hard time identifying suitable types of projects that fit. But there's a lot of needs in their communities that may well be better delivered by nonprofit organization. So I was just, you talked about potentially, transferring the municipal funds to a nonprofit for eligible activities. Do you have any thoughts or observations about how municipalities and nonprofits are making those types of connections about what the needs might be?
They're starting to bubble up. Local nonprofits are, if they have this is just based on my observation, just let me caveat there. If there is a statewide organization that is understanding that ARPA funds could be used to assist local nonprofits, I've been contacted by Vermont Arts Council, Let's Grow Kids, right? So these are all statewide entities that have connections to folks who could be eligible ARPA recipients. And so they're creating documents. I'm working with them to create basically one-pagers so that we can put them in front of municipalities, all of you, so you can understand, hey, if I get approached by someone, a nonprofit in the creative sector, I can understand how this would be ARPA eligible. Here are some examples. And so we haven't yet, I think it might be a question that's best lobbed out to those in participating today to see if they're actually getting approached by nonprofits and if they're interacting and considering funding nonprofits with some direct assistance. I'm going to guess there's at least one that I know of in the audience today. And
my question was about that.
What's that?
I said, my question is about that. And I've been in some conversations.
Yep.
Shall I go ahead? Yeah, I'm John Morey. I'm the Peru Select Board Chair. And so my question was about this. We could not find very many things, obviously, that met the eligibility. We don't have any of the infrastructure eligible. And so I immediately thought about the nonprofit thing. And we've been talking to a group called Neighborhood Connections, which is basically a social service provider in a neighboring town, Londonderry, but they provide services in the towns all around us. So I had a couple questions about the details of that. My assumption is that whatever money we give them they have to be for things they've done that meet the ARPA eligibility criteria, but they seem to have plenty. So they had plenty of lost revenue, which we didn't have, and things like that. So I'm assuming that's okay as long as they have expenditures that meet the qualifications. My other question was, I want to make sure that those expenditures don't have been spent in our town. So
you'd have to show benefit in your community.
Right. So do we have to show benefit to our community for the full amount we give them? Or as long as they can demonstrate that, they have eligible expenses and they can spend the money, it doesn't have to be attributed to our community.
So I think of, I don't have a great answer for you. I wish I did. But the best way I've reasoned through it is when when you're putting your budgets together, you do appropriations to human services type organizations, correct? And so asking those organizations to give you what services were specifically for my community in the last year. Like, can you tell me based on your data, who you served from my community in the last year? You can ask them for that, and you can use that as your backup to demonstrate, we gave to this organization, they serviced out of all of their population, they serviced X number of residents, X percentage of their client base was for our community. That's data, real data that you can put there to defend your reasoning for giving to that organization.
But I'm not concerned about defending it to our citizens. The question is the federal requirement
defending it to
the money
Treasury
we give them?
Yes,
Okay,
that's what I mean.
so
Defending it to Treasury. That's your data. Mm-hmm.
So you think we can only give them money that could be allocated to our population they serve and nothing beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to give money to an organization that doesn't touch your community, I think that would be hard for your community to stomach that, but I also think it would be hard for Treasury.
Right, but they do touch our community, but probably not to the extent which we could give them funding.
Right, and your funding might be proportional to the amount that they touch your community. So instead of giving your whole award to them, you might portion it out based on the level of service that you receive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I see
The problem
Shane's
is we have
hand.
nothing else to spend it on, so.
Sure.
we could give
Well,
them much more.
I'm gonna say one thing and then I'm gonna go to Shane because Shane is the person who I've been talking to about this very topic, right? And so have you done the lost revenue calculation yet? Jonathan?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well, that would be for the nonprofit, you mean?
Nope,
Your
that's for the
lost
town.
revenue.
That's for your town.
We didn't lose any revenue.
Did you use Treasury's formula to do the calculation?
No.
Okay, so on Friday, where we took Government Finance Officers Organization's lost revenue calculator and we modified it to be more Vermont centric. So since most towns in the state of Vermont use NEMRIC for their general ledgers, it is structured based on that with instructions if you use NEMRIC. My apologies to everybody who does not use NEMRIC, but we had to kind of go to the heart of who does, and that's the NEMRIC folks. So we'll be releasing that on Friday. If towns are still getting hung up using that calculator, you can call NEMRIC and they will help you with that. But Treasury's formula is very specific and it allows for a 4.1% revenue growth year over year. And that's really important as you're calculating your lost revenue because you probably never would have included a 4.1% growth in your revenue year over year as you were doing your budgeting each year. So I encourage everybody, don't just look at your books and say, oh, we were whole. Do the calculation. Take the time, go through, enter your numbers. It's worth the effort. Even if you come up with $10,000 of your ARPA award, that's considered lost revenue, you can use that for the provision of government services. And the provision of government services is pretty much anything that you would use your general operating budgets to fund. So you suddenly went, what, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to follow up really quickly before we left Jonathan's question from Peru. I'm thinking about like an organization that, let's say provides, a public health program that's eligible under the ARPA eligibility requirements. And the program is open and available and accessed by residents of the community, in this case, Peru. I mean, could they just, provide funding for that program? I mean, trying to document like a $1-to-1 dollar match and say, well, 23 people from Peru took advantage of it and that's worth $2,000 a person is a bit of a reach. But, if there's a program that's eligible and it's open to people in the community, it seems like that should be okay. Yes, no, maybe.
Are you asking me?
Yes, yeah, I assume, I don't know, but it just seems like
That's the thing,
accounting
Jim.
is-
I think there's a lot of assuming because if you read the guidance, there's no black and white there. And so I think it really boils down to you have to draft a narrative to go with each project and you just explain in there. And if you have some data to back up showing that organization touches your community and how, and it's an eligible use, then I think you're good. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of gray area here. And so I just sort of fall back on, you have 3 years to spend the money. So while for some communities, you might not have something right now, you might in 6 months.
Katie, can I add something real quick about that small community not necessarily having a project idea? And I'm not trying to take away from other people's questions, but just while we're on that subject. And Dot, I hope you don't mind, I'm gonna use Brookline as an example. Katie and I met with Brookline and, I think maybe some of the initial thinking was, well, we're a tiny town. We don't have a village center. We have very few staff. What can we do? But, sitting there at the table with them, I think we realized the town garage has no bathroom. And so it'd be nice for the road crew to be able to go to the bathroom somewhere in between plowings. It's actually warm and it has a flushable toilet as opposed to, outhouse. I think that was Brookline. But then the other things too is Brookline amazingly has a building that is a daycare center, and this could be an opportunity to invest in that daycare center because I think it may have some wastewater challenges. And then they also own a church that's going to become a community center. It of course has, needs some water and wastewater upgrades, and so there's another option. So you may be a tiny town, but wastewater doesn't have to necessarily translate into some big community system. And I'm not pushing wastewater. I'm just saying, in this small town case, just in a conversation, we identified a few, actual infrastructure projects that would improve things for the town. So
I think, does Peru have a general store?
We do, yes.
Yeah, like, for some communities, their general stores are almost shuttering because of COVID. And so you could use your money to help strengthen your general store. I have a weak spot for general stores, so that's why I use that example. But they, your general store staff were essential workers. They're eligible for premium pay. And, I know from my old community that they are struggling to keep the doors open and the lights on because they can't find workers. So if you can really attract somebody to come work there, just to give those folks a break with premium pay, then you can also do that. I mean, and Chris really said it great in that last comment is, I am happy to come sit with your community, join. Are you Chris? That's your community, right? Peru?
John.
Okay. And meet with.
that's Jim. If they want to join us, they're welcome to.
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to sit down with you and meet with you and say, tell us about your community. I meet with a lot of towns, and we go from having no projects to all of a sudden, oh, I never realized that. Oh, I never realized that, with 15 minutes, 30 minutes of conversation. And so while you might not have projects, you do. And I'm sure not that I really want to go out but every single town in Vermont has to comply with the municipal roads general permit. And so if you have stormwater work that you need to do, eligible. If it's to come into compliance with that permit, correct? I'm going to lean on a RPC to back me up there.
The water quality thing, I'm still waiting for the guidance on that as far as what qualifies, because they talk about water quality as it relates to drinking water quality, I believe. And so I'm waiting for.
I have it from a pretty high authority at ANR that the general rule is if it's for you to come in compliance with your municipal roads general permit. I'll confirm that again.
Yeah, confirm that, but also beyond MRGP, Katie, I would say if it could address stormwater, there may also be some potential hazard mitigation projects.
Mm-hmm. Brookline was a good example of that, right?
If you have gained culverts that blow out every storm or something like that. So before folk run off and start, because every town has MRGP.
Right.
Before you run off, start putting money into MRGP, I would let us get you guidance on the water quality provision of ARPA more broadly. So that you can see the range of projects where you might be able to make some investments.
Yep. So Shane, I'm sorry, you had your hand up and I don't know if we got back to you.
Hi. Getting back to what Jonathan said, and Katie, you and I have been communicating a little bit on this. That not-for-profit that he mentioned has also approached us, as have several other not-for-profits. And we want to be able to come up with a reasonable and fair process in which to review these, make decisions, but also in order to look at apples to apples, create some kind of process that all the different not-for-profits can work with. And we'd also like to find out, again, what Jonathan alluded to is services by community. How much of is the not-for-profit talking to its other communities for which it provides services?
Yeah.
And is this equitable? And can we all get together and do a certain project? So we're as you mentioned before, you had a list of what other communities are doing. We have an open agenda item for our select board meetings where ARPA is being discussed, and different not-for-profits are rotating through the meetings and giving us, these people, they know their stuff, and they're giving us the latest and greatest information, as are you. I want to thank you for all that. But we're just trying to come up with a decent process that we can work with. And I got to imagine that there are other small communities like ours in the same boat that don't want to reinvent the wheel. But we'd like to try to get together with at least our surrounding communities, Peru, Landgrove, what have you.
And you've, in the blink of an eye, you've essentially all become grantors. So you're standing up all your own little mini grant programs. And so you have to go through that process of almost like an application. I mean, if you've ever applied for a grant and gone through the system to get that money, you're essentially on the other end of that system being the grantor now. And it's there's a lot of administrative work to that. And it is about being fair and being able to make your selections in a way that you can pass the straight face test, right? And it's very challenging.
I think it's going to be a struggle to spend the money that we're allocated, frankly, because we, again, like Peru, we don't have water and wastewater. We're actually doing a study right now for water and wastewater in our villages, but we're going to get just shy of $500,000. You can't do much with that when it comes to bricks and mortar.
So I have not been monitoring the chat. I don't know if there's anything in there.
We've just been putting some resources and, links in there, but I don't think there's any questions right now.
Thank you. And Peter, I think you had your hand up for a while there. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. In some ways, the conversation has shifted a little bit. I just wanted to encourage other municipalities out there to use the lost revenue coordinator if you have calculator if you have not done so. I used it a few weeks back. We anticipated in Guilford, we anticipated a small loss. I used a calculator and was actually shocked with what came out of the calculator, so much so that I actually deleted the whole thing and started over again and got the same result. And so using the calculator, it showed us that due to COVID, we had a 22% loss in Guilford. So I would encourage you, if you have not done so, to use the calculator that's there, or wait for the new one that's going to come out later this week.
If I can get it on the website sooner, it'll be there. But we worked with a Vermont government finance person who's very savvy, and she took it and created a good modification to it that's more user friendly. And we've partnered with NEMRIC, so everybody's on the same sheet of paper. So if you're not entirely comfortable with the calculator, you can. I don't know how NEMRIC's going to handle it, but you can ask them and they can do it for you. So then you're even more assured that your number is correct.
Yep. No, I'm pretty confident in my numbers. I'm just trying to encourage others to use it too.
Thank you. Yeah. It's worth the exercise. I've had a lot of people who say, nope, we didn't have any. And it's like, use the calculator. Use the calculator.
And just briefly on the topic of reaching out to or working with nonprofits, Guilford has directly reached out to all Guilford-based nonprofits, as well as businesses and individuals that have suffered as a direct result of COVID. And we've put, the select board and I have put together an application process that for those groups. And thus far, we've been having a very high success rate, particularly with nonprofits. So if anyone wants to talk with me about how we're doing that, you're welcome to do so.
Jonathan?
So the other category of infrastructure, which we could certainly spend money on, is broadband. And we have horrendous broadband, But, you know, our total money is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $120,000. So the question is like, we can't really envision what we could do with that money that's going to make any difference, considering how much we need. And then the question is, you know, where do you spend it and how do you spend it anyway? So I did listen to, I guess it was the, what are the other funders webinars, and there was a lot of talk about passing that money through to the
Communication Union District.
Yeah, the Communication Unions District. Does that seem like the most logical thing to do if we wanted to put money towards broadband? But
It could be. I mean, so we're going to do a topic specific broadband webinar. Tentatively, I want to say, hang on, let me check my calendar here for the date. It might be, if I can get everybody coordinated, December 1st, which is a Wednesday. And so bringing together the Vermont CUD Association, Vermont Community Broadband Board, which is the entity formed through which all the state's ARPA money will be channeled, and a member of the Public Service Department. So they're all the key players in the broadband topic. So I think 150 million is going out already. There's more than $500 million that will be allocated of ARPA money in total. We don't know if more of that will come in the next legislative session. There's broadband money in the infrastructure bill on the national level. There's more broadband money to follow. So you might see where some of that lands. It's the choice of the community, really. And if you sit on your ARPA money and you want to, you know, that broadband's your issue, right? In your community, but your award's not huge, you could conserve some of that and pay for drops for people disproportionately impacted by COVID, or anybody who is low income community could use it for digital literacy if you wanted to do that. I mean, there's a couple of ways, there's lots of different ways you could put it towards broadband without it actually being the whole system. There are different ways to do that. So.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know how to raise a fake hand. I'm putting my real hand up.
I love real hands.
Okay. I'm Leslie Addison. I'm the Director of HR United Counseling Service, and I'd be remiss if I didn't just say hello. UCS is the designated agency in Bennington County, and I know that, you know, as we research this more, you know, we'd love to talk to our local partners as a result of our services to the community and behavioral health and mental health services. So I just wanted to say hello and say that to you, and thank you for all you're doing.
Don't be shy. There you go, Margot.
Katie, I don't know if you want to just quickly mention, yesterday in a meeting, we had discussed steps that villages or towns should take if they were interested in transferring money to either another municipal entity or to any entity, and that you were going to be working on some guidance
Language, yeah, just so that you're covering yourself legally, right? So you're having those conversations on the record and passing all the right motions that you should be. So drafting some guidance with some model, you know, language for folks to use if they want to, just to plunk it into your meeting minutes, just to simplify things. We're also going to be hopefully working on a template for a simple agreement. Really simple, like one that can get you started. So has all the, you know, we'll have one of our municipal assistance attorneys help us with that. It'll have all the legal language that you need in there, you know, you need to plug in the scope of work of whatever, you know, when you transfer the money, you're going to want to know what's happening with the money, right? So you'll want to detail out in there will happen with the money that's being transferred to this entity, and the terms and conditions. So you can do that through simple agreements. Sometimes it's just a little memo of understanding, but some sort of document that demonstrates backs up the transfer of money and why it's being transferred. So that's to come. I want to say I said I would do that in a month. After Thanksgiving, I think was my date I put for that. So that's to come. And, you know, a lot of it is waiting to see what Treasury is going to do. Because the hardest thing is to draft tools and templates only to have it change. And then so we've put floated these out into the universe. People start using them. Then we have to pull them all back and put new ones out there. And then you have this version nightmare of what's the right one to use. And it's tough. So we've been waiting to see, you know, when's the final rule going to be here? When the final rule is here, that's it. The ink's dry and the rubber meets the road. And so there are no hanging, I mean, there'll still be gray areas, I am positive, but we will at least have certainty of what our gray areas are. So. And Jeff, you had a question about.
Jim has his hand up too.
Oh, what was that?
Someone else may have, I'm trying to keep an eye out for hands. Jim had his hand up.
Yep, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Jim, I'm just gonna put Jeff ahead of you because this one's been sitting in the chat for a while and I didn't get to it, I'm sorry. Can non-government residents contact you to bounce ideas off? I get contact. Yes?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I meant to say, can non-government officials, like I'm on the Energy Committee and also on the Green Up Day, but I'm not a select board member. But if I had a question, could I email you, Katie,
Yep.
or is it more for?
Yep, I got questions from, as long as you're on a board authorized committee, I'm
Okay.
Feel free. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, there wouldn't be a lot, but just
That's okay.
wanted to know. Thank you.
No problem. Jim, I'm sorry. Thanks for waiting.
Okay, I learned something by listening more than talking. Quick, just I want to say an early thank you and a plug for the templates and models you're talking about developing, because as a village with, you know, very part-time, a few volunteer trustees and no staff, our plan right now is to transfer all of the money from the village to the town. With a list of recommendations that all we can do is scream and complain later if they don't happen. But this is what we'd like to see the money spent on that benefits the village. But we're also thinking about a particular nonprofit that definitely does a lot of work around the village. And so I need to be sure that if we do that, we've got language and commitments that properly, because we're still responsible to the Treasury for that money, is my understanding.
You are.
I don't want to have to pay out of my pocket because they messed up how they spent it. So.
Sure. And I'm glad that you said that. And for some of these organizations that are asking for money, the really savvy ones will say to you, we take federal funds all the time and we'll do all your reporting for you. And if you're a small community, wow, that makes it that much more attractive, right? So that, and you could even put that in your agreement. Like those are the things that if I were drafting an agreement, I would want all that in there so that when the time came, I can say, look, I have an agreement with you that says you're going to do this for me. I love, you know, agreements that are really clear. And so, and, you know, we were hoping that on the national level, some templates would have been made so that everybody's doing the exact same thing. How perfect of a world would that be? But it doesn't seem to be happening on the national level. So we're going to have to, I think we're just going to have to do our own. And so I'm, for those communities that are entertaining this and already jumping in the pool, I'm going to reach out to you guys and try and work with you. And if you have a good process, I'm going to ask to steal it. and work from that as a model to then create a statewide template that we can roll out.
Well, one slight wrinkle in that, because I'm thinking of two things. If we were to give money to the nonprofit, for example, there would be for a specific purpose, and we would want specific information that properly satisfies the treasury, so that ideally, this may be a lot to hope for, we would simply be passing it on.
That's exactly
But
it. Yep.
on the other hand, if we transfer money to the town, it could go into any number of projects and that we have nothing to do with.
Not if you specify what it gets transferred for the use on the receiving
Okay.
end. You can specify that.
If we were to transfer the money to the town and say,
Yep.
add it to your pool of funds, does that transfer the responsibility to the treasury for accounting for those funds?
No, you're still responsible for reporting.
Okay, that's not going to be a big selling item to the board.
Yeah. So specificity is really helpful
Yeah,
so that you can demonstrate delivery of what you specified. Mhm.
so we will definitely need that model language, so thank you.
Yeah, and if you go to transfer it to the town and you have your list of items that you've agreed upon, it would be helpful to work with them to agree upon a list. But if you
Right.
transfer it, if you want to transfer it and these are the uses that you want them to spend your funding on, and they say they don't have to accept it. They don't take the money. You're left with it and you have to figure out something else to do with it.
Yeah, and in the final analysis, we don't have to take it if we can't agree.
Exactly. And at the very end of the day, we don't want anyone to do this, but if you're coming up on December 31st, 2024, and you haven't spent any of your money, then you give it back. But we want every penny spent. We want every penny to stay in Vermont and do good work. So. It's quiet. If there are no more questions, I'm gonna hand it back to the RPCs for you to.
Well, yeah, it looks like so Jim Sullivan had to leave. So I think, yeah, if there are no more questions, we'll wrap this up. And like I said, this is being recorded. So once the recording is available, it will be posted on the BCRC website, and I will make sure to share it with our, sorry, I see a hand from Jeff.
Yeah, real quick on that note, are the PowerPoint, are those slides available too?
Truth be told, I worked on it right up until we joined the Zoom. So I'll save it to a PDF and I'll email it to Callie.
I guess I'll just, if it's okay, Katie, my staff, Sue and Margot and John, if you guys have anything you want to offer, go ahead. Or not.
Well, I will, again, I'll share sorry, I see John Bennett unmuting.
I just wanted to say nothing particular to add. Great to see so many folks, and thank you all for putting this on. I'm finding it helpful.
Good to see you, John.
See you too.
Yeah, thanks everyone. The recording will be posted and shared, and we will get it to you. So thanks for joining.
Thank you, everybody.